Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship. Call first. The building is locked. 612-315-6778. We try to do the philosophy of eschatology. John Haller does a beautiful job on all of the news that's fit to print. I do the philosophy, what you need to know, your reality, our existence, the thought behind the thought. We try not to be disparate. As my father taught me years ago, keep the Bible in one hand and keep your newspaper in the other hand and look back and forth. It should make sense, people. It should fit with the Bible if you interpret it properly. We're Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship. The cosmos is changing into the seven trumpets time, kind of, and when. So we'll go through that because Elon Musk is working with NASA right now to launch a spacecraft to kick an asteroid off course. Interesting. So they're they would do better than blasting it into pieces because that creates smaller asteroids. They're almost more dangerous than the major asteroid because the big one kind of blows up or sometimes bounces off and bounces back out. So SpaceX is working with NASA and they're going to hit something that's about twice the size of the Statue of Liberty and see if they can knock it, or if you could catch it in a net, so to speak, and push it off course. That would be the best way to do it. So deflect is the best way, and they're working on it right now. Well, that means that they have a reason for doing this. Now, Elon Musk has been building his SpaceX things because he thinks he wants to go to Mars and then come back and repopulate America or the Earth after we blow ourselves up with nuclear bombs. And we've gone through a peaceful time frame, but now China's got fast rockets and Russia's got fast rockets, and the United States really doesn't know how to handle this, and we're at a weak point right now. So it's very interesting that Elon Musk is doing this work for NASA. Very interesting, and they're paying him obviously. This is a very profitable thing for him to do. He's failed before too, and he will fail again. But this is very interesting that they are blasting asteroids 6.8 million miles away, and this asteroid is not planning to hit us. So, if there is such a mental concept as that, so I follow Ben Davidson with Suspicious Observers, and he's been predicting disaster cycles based on 12,000 year time frames, 6,000 year time frames, and so if you want to watch any of his disaster section videos, they're very interesting. I can't say that he's the best at this because he's not a physicist, he's not a scientist, he's an attorney that studies. But he does boil down all the content and hand it off to us 3 minutes every day. So I watch him and I trust him. And he really doesn't have any motives other than he loves his wife and kids and wants a better world for us. He's not a believer, but he's not an anti-believer. He's a Jewish kid raised Episcopalian, and he doesn't have a relationship with God or Jesus, you would say. He just studies. But yet, I like what he's doing because I don't have the time to dig through all the content, and I gather some of the content from him. I'm going to give you some other people's content today. I don't trust them like I trust Ben, but I do trust Ben. So what's the deal? Solar flares, CMEs, solar wind events, that's what he monitors. That's what I check on. And those can cause crustal disturbances, which means that the crust could shift and we could have ourselves a big earthquake. Or we could also have things like solar flares. So these are large ejections of protons from the sun's atmosphere, coronal mass ejections. And we'll talk about that more today based on events over the years. These are ginormous releases of plasma and magnetism from the sun's surface, and they can get big and bad. Then there's high-speed solar wind from coronal holes, and then there's just solar particle events. And so there are many different factors that can change our weather and our climate on the Earth, and it comes from outside. It does. So we're really arguing cosmologically today, or naturally. You could argue global, whatever, um, coming from outside to the inside. That seems to be what we'll be discussing in the Bible today. This is the Carrington event. So Elul 1, which is the 40 days prior to Yom Kippur of that particular year, which would have been 1859. That was August 28th through September 2nd. And what you'll see is that there was a big blast. It was one of the biggest blasts ever in 1859, and it fried our telegraph lines. We didn't have telephones back then. We didn't have anything. We didn't have satellites. This is 1859, people. We had telegraphs, and it fried them, and it fried other things. So if we would have had this event happen today, it would be brutal. And these are, I think they're about 200-year events, something like that. So we should expect another one at some point in time. So this was the Carrington event again, and it hit our magnetosphere. But back then we had a really strong magnetosphere. Right now we don't. So this is one of the strongest solar storms in recorded history when it hit Earth, the Carrington event. So it really occurred over a few days, but there was the one big day. When a flare hits our magnetosphere, it causes major aurora events. So you should see the aurora borealis. But this time it went all the way down to the Caribbean, which is amazing, and it would knock out global telecommunications of that time frame or of our time frame. So be aware of that. These events occur, and Ben monitors those things, but they also cause all the energy to go in through the poles and then come back out through the crust. Now here's one other event that occurred, and so this is 1908, 2 Tammuz, which is, the Tammuz time frame, almost up to the Dire Straits. So that's 1908 again, and this was a large asteroid. And now, whenever we observe Asteroid Day, it's on June 30th, based on the Tunguska event of 1908. And so the sky fell to Earth. It was a major meteorite impact. And this is in northern Russia. It wiped out a certain area. It would have been like an atomic bomb. It would have been that bad. So be aware of that. These events occur, whether it's coming from the sun or, a CME or a solar hole or whatever it happens to be, a coronal hole. Or it could be, in this case, asteroids, meteorites. And we'll discuss all of those things in a little bit here as we go through the Bible. So once again, we do the philosophy of eschatology. I try not to twist the Bible. I try to give you not fake news, I'm kidding, and give you real prophecy in terms of what's happening outside of the earth and on the earth, because we react to whatever occurs outside. As I state frequently, we're in the birth pangs. And I want you to notice that the directions, the Western civilization is falling apart. East would be wars east of Jerusalem, and those are the Bush-Cheney wars. North, we're starting to see crop failures and higher prices for food in the northern climates right now. Seal 4, I'm thinking that it's starting out in Australia and New Zealand as the totalitarians come in, because it's not just death of 1/4 of the world, it is also crazy leaders. And we're getting the crazy leaders, and Australia and New Zealand seem to be the leaders in that. So then we move on to Seal 5 after that, and then Seal 6, and Seal 6 matches up with the first 4 trumpets. They're all environmental, so I want you to see that. That's why I kind of did the first 4 trumpets in green. I didn't do Seal 6 that way because it is cosmological, and some of it's coming from outside too. So let's discuss that. When we hit the tribulation is the time of the trumpets. The 7 trumpets, and 4 of those, again, are environmental. Then the Great Tribulations, the last 3.5 years, those are the bowls. The bowls are just brutal. We won't be discussing those today. We have to deal with the fact that there are people that are evil, and these are, none of these are part of the Antichrist or the false prophet for that matter. They're just big and bad, and they're doing horrible things to us. So there's big tech, big satellites, big pharma, big media, big woke, and they are horrible right now. They're getting worse. Then we move on to big banks and big China, because China's a major factor. Then big church, because church is deadwood right now. And then there's big slavery, which I call that just being slaves to fear. Okay, but then the final thing is God is involved in this. So it won't happen until God allows certain things to happen. That's based on we're supposed to keep the covenants, and if we don't keep the covenants, we get the plagues. That's part of the program. You can argue only the Jews get it, but you're wrong. It happens to everybody. And at some point in time, God is going to push the button, and more things are going to occur. So cosmos will be involved. So I want you to see that today as we move forward through the slides. So keep in mind that God has judged many times before with, we'll call them meteorite showers. Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot, technically is his name, and that was meteorite showers. And it really did. Well, you saw that Tanguska event. That's what Sodom and Gomorrah looked like, only it was a lot of salt too. Then Egypt was another case where you have meteorite showers, but then also you see it in Seal 6, Trumpet 1, Trumpet 2, Trumpet 3, Trumpet 4, to a greater event. They get larger. And then you actually see a star falling out of heaven in Trumpet 5. I'll include that because it's a woe, but technically it's not the same as the first four trumpets. So just be aware of that as you read your Bible, that they go through in a line and everything lines up. No, there are narrative breaks, but everything's linear in Revelation. So we'll just move through. The other thing is that I want you to see the time frame so you can kind of plot out some of these things. So when they finished their witnessing, the beast came up out of the abyss to fight against them and overcome them and kill them and their dead bodies. So these are the two witnesses, will lie in the main street of the great city, whose name, to reflect its spiritual condition, is Sodom and Egypt. I wanted you to see those cities because Sodom was hit by meteorites and asteroids. Egypt was hit by asteroids, meteorites. Okay, the city where the Lord was executed on a stake. The second woe has passed. The third woe is coming quickly. So that means the sixth trumpet has occurred and the seventh is ready to go. So you get a rough time frame, and they are prophesying for 1,260 days. So that means we're probably at the midpoint almost of the Great Tribulation, of the 7 years. And so we're 3.5 years kind of into it, and probably 3 years into it at that point in time, based on my timing. And so I wanted to show you one other thing, because you'll see another exodus during the end of days, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spoke to you. You shall see no more again, and you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. So we haven't really seen that again, but we might see it again during the end times. So this guy that made the slide said, this is like a Revelation 11:8. Their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, aka America. Oh, he's stating America. Whatever. It's not going to be America. It's going to be in Jerusalem. Sorry, that's the only city where he was crucified. Comets. So we need to introduce one aspect of comets to you. We'll introduce some other ones, but this one's huge. HNC or HCN, it's basically hydrogen and cyanide. Oh, what does that make? That makes a dangerous gas, a horrible gas. And so, according to NASA, cyanide compounds discovered on meteorites may hold clues to the origin of, no, death, not life. Silly NASA. Cyanide kills. Hydrogen cyanide kills quickly. So just so you can see, the outside portion of a comet is frozen gas. CO, carbon, CO2, you know what CO2 is because you hear about it all the time. H2O, which is water. NH3, CH30H. I don't know these. I failed chemistry, guys. I didn't do well because my chemistry professor did not like me. That's another issue. Don't dredge it up. HCN is dangerous, guys. And so there are many more chemicals. And so there's also some really cool stuff on comets, like diamonds and graphite and silicon carbide and titanium, silicon. It's got all sorts of amazing things. So keep in mind, though, when you see the hydrogen cyanide, I'm blanking on it, HNC and HCN in comets, it'll bring about headache, dizziness, suffocation, death after 30 to 60 minutes exposure, or instant death if it's enough parts per million. So keep that in mind. OSHA is saying, well, 10 parts per million, and it's permissible exposure. Well, comets produce much more in a localized area, so just keep that in mind. So that's why when we get into the next thing, which is comets are called vile stars, according to the Chinese. Why? Because of hydrogen cyanide. Ancient Chinese astronomers chronicled the numerous episodes where the apparitions of comets preceded plague and disaster. They just noted it time and time again over thousands of years. And so their meticulous observations were compiled on a Mawangdui silk, and about 300 BC it was compiled. So they had 29 different cometary forms, and various disasters associated with them dating back as far as 1500 BC. They did say comets were vile stars. The fish grew sick, crops failed, emperors and common people die, men go to war. That's what happens when you have what's described in Seal 6 through Trumpet 4. Now, it's happened, obviously. I think the picture on the upper left is the war against, why am I blanking on it? It's Isaiah 37, and it's not Nebuchadnezzar. I'm having problems on the name right now. Anyway, Sennacherib was going to fight, and there was seemingly a sword from God that came out and just killed these guys. And so just keep in mind there are these times when God brings comets or other things like that to kill off the enemies of Israel, especially if they repent. And so I'm showing the works of Josephus on the upper right-hand side. Well, Josephus chronicled, and interesting, the comet that popped up in 66 Common Era. So the comets are chronicled throughout history constantly. And so here's pictures of a comet, and then here is the basically some commentary about from Josephus about the Jerusalem wars or the Judean wars. Thus it was that the wretched people were deluded at that time by charlatans and pretended messengers of the deity, while they neither heeded nor believed in the manifest portents that foretold the coming desolation, but as if thunderstruck and bereft of eyes and mind, disregarded the plain warnings of God. So it was when a star resembling a sword, and in the Greek, Josephus wrote it as a rhomphaia. So that is the one sword that's listed in Revelation 6:8 during the fourth horseman. So keep that in mind. It stood over the city, and a comet which continued for a year. Comets don't continue for a year. It's possible that it was Halley's Comet, but it was very bright, very powerful, and very foreboding as a sword, a judgment sword hanging over the sky. So that's his Book of War, 6.5.4. And now we're going to move forward to 1833 and pretend that you live in upstate New York. So you're a Mormon maybe, or you're a Millerite, or whatever else, and suddenly, and because most of the groups, including the four first formations of the Jehovah's Witnesses, were all in upstate New York, and they were just hanging around, and they had a fervency that Jesus was going to return, and they had a fervency for holiness, but yet the groups started to get into cult-like activities, and you saw that with the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. So there are the promises out there. I just wanted to cite that real quick before I cite the actual situation here. I will bless you, and I will most certainly increase your descendants to as many as there are the stars in the sky or grains of sand on the seashore. Your descendants will possess the cities of their enemies. So that's Genesis 22:17, made to Abraham. But on the other hand, in 1833 on Kislev 1, and we're in that time frame right now, we're in Hanukkah, this famous engraving of the 1833 Leonid meteor shower was produced by an Adventist, okay, so the Millerites, you could say, because the Adventists didn't start until a few years later. First it was the Millerites until the 1843, 1844 debacle. Adolf Wilm. It's based on a painting by Swiss artist Karl Jauslan, which in turn was based on the first-person account of the 1833 storm by a minister, Joseph Harvey Wagner, who saw the 1833 shower on his way from Florida to New Orleans. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is not even upstate New York. I'll show you that picture next. But this famous shower, hundreds of thousands of meteors per hour were seen. It was the first recorded meteor storm of modern times. This kicked off the fervency of eschatology, people, and kicked off, really, you could say, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Millerites, which are the Seventh-day Adventists, and also the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, you could say some of the groups didn't really form until 1859 or later. It doesn't matter. They were in upstate New York, and they saw this. So here it is. This is Niagara Falls with meteorites falling everywhere. And so it was also the year of the strange phenomenon when the heavens seemed about to part with a starry train. I witnessed this gorgeous spectacle and was awestruck. The air seemed filled with bright descending messengers from the sky. It was about daybreak when I saw this sublime scene. Amazing, but also with hydrogen cyanide dropping on their heads too. So this was This is by Pigeon Roost, the Great Meteor Storm of 1833. And Abraham Lincoln was alive during this time frame, and he called it an unusually intense meteor storm and not the end of the world. So he was correct with that. But this did kick off the fervency, people. Okay, so now we're going to move into modern days. And I already mentioned Ben Davidson, who I trust. I don't trust this guy. This guy is a business guy, so he knows how to produce coffee better based on economic cycles, or rather environmental cycles. And he's very confident in his abilities, and he really hasn't studied fully. But here's what he's saying. He's saying in 79 AD, we had a certain cosmological situation where we had Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all together, and they kind of created a second atmosphere at that point in time, he's arguing. Then in 1486, it created that second atmosphere again. He's saying this has not been experienced really in 2,000 years with this type of a problem where those planets are going to kick off a second magnetic field starting from 2022 to 2024. And he's saying that it'll force continental crust instability, create conditions possibly for the sixth seal, okay, which would cause earthquakes and other issues like that, and possibly allow certain debris. It might attract debris and force it into our area. And our magnetosphere is thin, so it's been thinning 10% from 1880 to 2000 and 5% more from 2000 to 2010. Now it's thinning 20 times faster than we expect, and that is since 2010. So, and they aren't even reporting on it anymore either. So keep that in mind. So he's saying the second field will intensify day by day until 2024 in October. So it does match up with the festivals too. So he's saying September of 2022 starts it. So am I arguing that we're going in 2022? No. That's soon, people. I think we're more like 9 years away from Yeshua returning. So he argued 79 AD or CE, whatever you want to say. I say CE because Yeshua wasn't born on 0. Okay, he wasn't born exactly at that moment. He was probably born in 3 BCE. So I always go with Common Era rather than Anno Domini. So Pompeii occurred in 79. In 70, the Romans inflicted their damage on well, you saw it with Josephus, on Jerusalem. And then now, 9 years later, almost to the day, almost to the day, you've got, because it was on the Nav 9, Pompeii was destroyed by Vesuvius. So, and then now move forward. So that's 79 AD. That's David Devine cited that. But then a bean field in northern Minnesota. It's only 4 hours away from me, and actually it seems close. It collapses 25 feet. So a sheer wall occurred in rural Polk County of Minnesota, near Climax, Minnesota. Yeah, we have Fertile and Climax up there. Interesting cities. And so then we've never seen anything like this, but we're going to see. I think David might be partially correct, but then again, Ben's talking about this stuff too, that you're going to see some crustal abnormalities. It's just going to happen, and you're going to see things like this where everything drops by 25 feet overnight. Now, we'll go into the seals and apply what we just discovered and see if it works out in the Bible. So, the sixth seal is fig-sized stars. So these are tiny. Look at the lower right and see the figs. They're small, so you could fit, 10 of them in your hand. Okay. Then I watched as he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun turned black as sackcloth worn in mourning, and the full moon, not a partial moon, a full moon, it could be an eclipse moon too, turned blood red. The stars fell from the heaven to earth just as a fig tree drops its figs when shaken by a strong wind. So they're fig-like. The sky receded like a scroll being rolled up. That's the magnetosphere. Every mountain and island moved from its place. That's crustal shifting, as we've described. Then the Earth's kings and rulers and generals and the rich and the mighty, indeed everyone, slave and free, hid himself in caves and among the rocks. Now, Elon Musk and many other people, in fact, many, many, many of the millionaires, are building these cave hideaways right now, and they're all ready to go. Some of them are also planning to blast out into space because they really think they can get to Mars, say, and recolonize at a later date. So they really want to run to Mars. But mostly they want to be ready to go and go underground because you never know when things are going to hit. So then they hide themselves in caves and among the rocks and the mountains, and say to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one sitting on the throne and from the fury of the Lamb, and for the great day of their fury has come, and who can stand? So that's Revelation 6:12 through 17. Do I have friends that are tremendous scholars, Bible scholars, that disagree with me? Absolutely. They say there are types and shadows, and the seals overlap or correspond exactly with the trumpets. So they're going to say that this is the end of the world. The problem is, if you really look back and look at the term Peleg, the name Peleg, you'll see that's when the earth was divided, and you'll see that a couple of times. You'll see that in Genesis 10:25, and then in 1 Chronicles 1, and you'll see that the earth was divided during the time of Peleg. So we can survive through the earth being divided. And they're going to say, "Oh, this is a great earthquake." Yeah, it's a great earthquake. We've survived great earthquakes before. Okay. The Seventh-day Adventists like to cite the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. We survived that one. Now, it destroyed Portugal rather, and it really affected Spain too. But they rebuilt after that, yeah, and that was a great earthquake in terms of loss of life and other issues and weird cosmological effects. So the progression of size. Figs are smaller than hail. So we've seen the sixth seal fig-sized, 10 of them in your hand. Now the seven angels with the seven shofars prepared to sound them. And I go green here because in this case, these are environmental disasters specifically. So the first one sounded the shofar, and there came hail and fire mingled. So I'm going to argue that hail is bigger than figs. That's my argument. Hail and fire mingled with blood. It sounds more like Sodom and Egypt. Now, is this going to match up with the two witnesses that I cited before? I don't know. But it is interesting. Hail and fire mingled with blood and was thrown upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up. A third of the trees were burned up, and the green grass was burned up. At this point in time, if we go from the sixth seal to the first trumpet, any environmentalist can explain what's going on. This is cosmological. They're going to blame global warming or whatever they want to say, climate change. But I wanted you to see that it does make sense cosmologically. So if we drift back and we do Moses and Aaron going before Pharaoh, well, Pharaoh his enchanters could figure out a way to explain what was going on and duplicate it. So in terms of the cosmologists, they'll be able to duplicate it in a model and say, this isn't God. No, it's God, but they're going to say it's not God. So it's hail, blood, fire. Okay, and a third and a third and a third. Then the second one. So progression of size again. Hail is smaller than mountains. So the second angel sounded the shofar, and what looked like an enormous blazing mountain was hurled into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. That has not happened yet. Erwin Jacobs, love him. God bless him. He's dead now. He says, during World War II, a third of the ships of the seas were destroyed. No, not really. And a third of the sea creatures didn't die during that time frame. Now, a third of the sea to blood is interesting. That will affect everyone. So keep in mind that at some point in time, it's going to progress from fig size to hail size to mountain sized, and it's going to get bigger. So let's move through. So this is progression of size. The mountain is smaller than the great mountain. So this is going to be a great mountain, a megas. And so the third angel sounded his shofar, and a great star blazing like a torch fell from the sky into a third of the rivers and onto the springs of water, and the name of the star was Wormwood. And a third of the water became bitter, and many people died from the water that had been turned bitter from the wormwood. Now keep in mind that if you want to survive through this, if you get some wonderful sweet wormwood tea and drink it, it's going to be healthy for you. And that Moses threw the wormwood, we'll call it, it didn't say wormwood, it said which is a branch of some sort, into the waters to make the waters less bitter and drinkable and make it healthy for people. So just be aware of that when the wormwood comes, have some wormwood tea on hand. Go ahead and buy some now. It's fairly expensive. It's good stuff. Well, it tastes horrible, but who cares? I mean, if it keeps you alive, it also defeats certain illnesses that are popular right now in 2020 and 2021. So it really is medicinal in a healthy way. and it's been medicinal for 4,000 years. So keep that in mind. So now that's a third. That's wormwood, and so it's going to cause all sorts of the third of the waters, and these are important waters for us. These are the fresh waters, not just the sea. So keep in mind, that's what's coming after, and we're seeing the progression of size again. Then another progression of size. A mountain is smaller than the sun. So the fourth angel sounded his shofar, and a third of the sun was struck, also a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and the day had a third less light, and the night likewise. Then I looked, and I heard a lone eagle give a loud cry. So there's that whoa, whoa, whoa. So do you see the whoa, whoa, whoa in terms of the last three of the trumpets and how it matches up with that time going into the two witnesses? Do you see the connection between that? What I want you to be able to do is connect Revelation 8 with Revelation 11. And you kind of see it in the slide there too, because it then goes through. The first woe is Revelation 9, 1 through 12, and the next woe is Revelation 9, 13 through 21. And then it jumps to Revelation 11. But the main thing is there's these gaps in there where the first trumpets are environmental, the next two trumpets I can't describe. They're just absolutely, they're nuts for what humans would be able to describe. But the first four of these, any environmentalist could explain it so easily and make sense to you. So, he sounded his third. The fourth angel sounded the shofar, and a third of the sun was struck, third of the stars, and then everything was darkened, and a third less light, and whoa, 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 and then there's the three angels coming now, and you should be able to see the timing getting closer to the midpoint of the tribulation, the 7 years, and you should be able to lock in and see the connection between these things. So basically, the first woe would come, then the second woe, then the third woe, and that would get you pretty much to the midpoint, and the two witnesses would be gone and dead and resurrected. So just keep that in mind, and the progression is going through, and the environmentalists are doing just fine. But when you get to the fifth trumpet, which is the first woe, no environmentalist will be able to explain that one, because you're going to have little monsters coming up and stinging you, and you don't die for 150 days, and it's just brutal. Okay, so what I want you to be aware of is all the bad guys that are going to be on the planet that everybody says, oh, the Antichrist is coming, the Antichrist. He's not your first concern. He's late in the game, people. The false prophet is really your problem right now. He's doing his worst right now. Gog is really late in the process, too. Many believe it's Barack Obama. This is the fifth trumpet, the first woe of Revelation 9. I believe he's the 12-foot tall king angel of the abyss, but also the 9-foot tall horse-like locust from the abyss. That's from Revelation chapter 9. So that's that fifth trumpet, the first woe. And so those are real concerns for you as we move forward. As you see these environmental disasters occur, boom, 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 from the sixth seal through to the first four trumpets, then expect these guys after that. And then the sixth trumpet, 200 million cavalry soldiers, brutal. But then the Illuminati are a problem right now, and wicked humans. The people down the block that are going into Best Buy and raiding it, and they're getting a group discount by a light finger discount. Well, then you've also got 10 big tech horns, so big tech is doing their worst against us right now. You've got Satan, his fallen angels. Satan is cast out of heaven at some point in time. You're going to have more demonic activities. But what I want you to be aware of is that there will be natural disasters galore during the end times. And so you need to see that they get things started, and they can be explained by pharaohs, necromancers. So certain people, the environmentalists, will be able to say, this isn't God. Yeah, it's God, because it's going in a biblical progression. So you're going to be able to work this through, and I want you to be able to work it through in light of the two witnesses. So you can see as we get to that midpoint, the two witnesses are going to die, resurrect, and the woes are coming in during the time frame as they're late in their process of witnessing. And then the natural disasters, they fit in too. So seal 1, we're operating through that. That's the fall of Western civilization. Seal 2 is the Bush-Cheney Wars east of Jerusalem. Seal 3 is it's crop issues, and it's really price inflation, food inflation. Seal 3 is up in north. Seal 4, I think it's starting right now with totalitarian people in Australia. and New Zealand, and it's going to move forward from there. Seal 5 is martyrdom. Now, there's a lot of martyrdom right now, but it's going to get worse. Then Seal 6 is those burning figs in an earthquake, great earthquake, but it's survivable. But keep in mind, there's good people on the planet during the end times. Be one of the good people. Be a hagios, we call it in the Greek, or kedoshim in the Hebrew. Be one of those people that believes and leads other people to believe. So you know, there's the in-between people, and they're going to be asking questions. So answer the questions, refer them to the videos if you want to. But keep in mind, there's a process that we're going through, and your job is to be like an Esther, and really, you know, protect other people and witness to other people. So we're coming up to it, people. You want to wear a white garment that is the righteousness of Yeshua. So, you know, get your garments clean. Work on that. That's the end of the video. Be blessed. And I have so many problems now at the end of my videos. There it is. So God bless and take care.